Have you seen them? Cheatlo shuffled his tentacles. His frills waggled in amusement. They're like little stubs attached to a stalk. More like little stalks attached to a longer stalk, Hyfla corrected. She too waggled her frills. Their limbs are stalks. Greffon did not understand. Stalks? Cheatlo agreed. His tentacles straightened in an attempt to demonstrate. Literal stalks with bits of tendon and muscle to move them around. How does that work? Griffon's frill retracted as he tried to picture it. Not very well, I'd say. Hyfla wiggled her frills in her species' version of a giggle. I'm not sure they can wrap their stubs around prey in the open. I can't imagine how they would get a sleeka in a crevice. The trio were Gleasons. A Gleason roughly resembled an octopus with a large frill circling the back of its head. The creatures were a pale blue-green, and their frills glowed with phosphorescence. In the distant past, the frills had served to frighten away predators, but now they were mostly just a means of expression. I don't think they have to worry about that, Cheatlo said sagely. They're land-bound omnivores. Land-bound? Greffon was aghast. And they eat plants. How could a land-bound species even make it to space? They're the first, as far as I know, said Cheatlo. Air breathers, and they can't even hold their breath as the Torvan do. The poor sex can't handle pressure changes either. Their organs will explode outside of very specific atmospheric conditions. They need special equipment just to exist in the water. Unreal, said Greffon. Yes, said Hyfla. Very pitiable. Her frills wiggled again. But not as pitiable as their little stalk stubs. Don't be cruel, Hyfla. Cheatlo chided. The humans made it to the Starsea all by themselves, and they are about to be our guests. Cheatlo waved 3 of his tentacles in the direction of a sea lock. The ship they were on had 2, one at each end of the great cavernous oval that formed the hull of the sky swimmer. The vessel was one big open space, 700 feet long and 350 feet at its widest point. A crew of 36 Gleasons swam about, tending to the engines, monitoring environmental controls, and performing all the other myriad tasks required to keep a sky swimmer safe in the Starsea. Cheatlo, Hyfla, and Greffon were supposed to be attending to duties of their own, but excitement had got the better of them. The 3 had met very few other species, and those they had met had mostly been like them. Cephalopods were not the only intelligent species, but they were one of the very few capable of building and manipulating tools. It was only natural that they were the most common form of spacefaring life. I don't think she's being cruel, Cheatlo. Greffon came to Hyfla's defense. You can't deny these humans sound. Cheatlo's frill twitched, the Gleason equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Greffon faltered. Strange. And, His tentacles shuffled themselves with embarrassment. Disadvantaged. Thank you, Greffon. Hyfla brushed a tentacle against Greffon's in a gesture of mild affection. It was all he could do to keep his frills from shaking. Greffon was absolutely certain that Hyfla was the most beautiful and amazing being to ever grace the Starsea, or any other sea for that matter. They'd been best friends since hatching, and each day Greffon delighted in her presence, aware of how lucky he was to know such a creature. Not that he'd ever admit it out loud. Hyfla deserved far better than a poor sec like Greffon. Cheatlo flicked a knowing tentacle. Greffon had known him almost as long as he knew Hyfla, and he suspected the other male knew exactly how Greffon felt. Greffon appreciated his silence. Just be careful, all right? The Gleason turned an eye on the sea lock. I don't want us to offend our new friends. Are we sure they're friendly? Greffon asked. Most cephalopods treated each other well regardless of species, but the others? Not so much. What happens if they decide to attack. Attack with what? Asked Hyfla. They have no venom, no pincers, no tentacles. They can't even use their teeth because they'll drown if they expose their mouths. Oh. Greffon idly snatched a sleeka that was swimming by. The little fish were his favorite food, and they were abundant in the carefully curated ecosystem of the sky swimmer. They do sound sort of helpless, don't they? They can't be that bad, Cheetlo reasoned. They were the dominant species on their home world. Were they? Hyfla was doubtful. You said they were landbound. Did they even enter the sea? I don't know, Cheetlo admitted. Life-giving worlds are mostly ocean, she reminded him. These humans might have been the dominant form in their own environment, but that environment was probably just a small percentage sticking up out of the water, right? I don't know, Cheetlo repeated. We'll see soon enough, said Greffon. A warning chime rang through the waters of the ship. The sea lock's about to open. The three of them swam. They were not alone. Nearly every Gleason on the ship made for the sea lock, eager to see the strange beings that had come calling. Greffon hurried, taking water into his mantle and blasting it out of his siphon as hard and as fast as he could. He and his friends covered the distance in moments. Unfortunately, they had been on the other end of the sky swimmer. They were among the last to arrive. The sea lock opened. 3 beings swam into the ship. They were the strangest things Greffon had ever seen. Hyfla had been right. The humans were made of stalks. Long, thin limbs extended from their bodies in 4 places. The limbs were made of rigid stalks connected by some kind of hinge. The bottom limbs were longer than the top pair and ended in fins. No, not fins, Greffon realized. At least, not real ones. They were made of some kind of polymer. Perhaps the humans couldn't swim with their natural appendages. That led Greffon to notice that the black stuff covering the humans was not skin or scales. It was some kind of synthetic covering, perhaps to keep the creatures from becoming wet. He knew they were landbound, but he couldn't imagine a creature that couldn't survive contact with water. Strange. The black material covered the entirety of the creatures, save for one area on the spherical protrusion at the top of the creatures. The sphere appeared to contain the human sensory organs. Their version of a head, maybe. Greffon saw pairs of eyes behind a transparent covering. He didn't see their mouths or scent organs, but a tube led from the front of the spheres to a set of tanks strapped to the rear of the big middle section of their bodies. Strangest of all were the things at the end of their upper sets of limbs. Each of them had a roughly squarish flat appendage. 4 short, thin stalks protruded from the top of the appendage, with a thicker stalk sticking out of the side. These must be what the humans used in place of tentacles. They looked ridiculous. No wonder Hyfla had been so amused. Each of the stubs was made up of 2 or 3 short stalks connected by hinges. Greffon imagined they could move just enough to curl around a small object, but he doubted they would do it very well. They certainly wouldn't match the secure hold of his tentacles or the crushing power of the pincers other species used. They looked clumsy and ineffectual. They were also tiny. The longest stub couldn't be more than 2 or 3 inches long. Greffon felt a small swell of pity for the humans. Poor deformed sex. No wonder they were landbound. If his tentacles had been that short, he wouldn't have dared show himself in the sea either. The humans swam oddly. The front of their heads faced the bottom of the sky swimmer, and they pushed their front limbs ahead of them, stalk stubs straight. Then the stubs would curl slightly as the upper limbs moved on their hinges in a triangular motion. Their lower limbs with the fake fins moved up and down in a poor impression of the tail of a porpoise. It was a clumsy motion, and slow. Once they were out of the sea lock, one of the Gleasons pulled a lever. The sea lock whisked shut. The humans swam a few feet closer to Greffon and his fellows, then shifted until their fake fins were pointed at the bottom of the ship. Greffon swam a little closer, and they saw they were larger than he expected. The biggest one was almost 6 feet long. An old primal instinct prickled Greffon. In the sea, larger creatures were to be avoided. He pushed the feeling down. These humans may be longer than him, but they were slow and clumsy. He doubted they could catch him, and they had no way to hurt him if they did. Large as they would be helpless against Greffon's tentacles and poisonous beak. Besides, they'd come as friends. Gleasons had made first contact with the humans 2 months ago. They'd interacted several times. By all accounts, the creatures were strange but friendly. Human technology was very different from Gleason's, and the resources they used were different enough that there was no fear of competition, nor had they shown any sign of aggression. If anything, they'd seemed excited and eager to please. The middle human raised and waggled one of their ridiculous upper appendages. Hello! The voice came through Greffon's Farspeak implant. The implants used radio waves to transmit between Gleasons on different sky swimmers. They also served as translators when dealing with other species. The voice the translator used for this human was low-pitched, implying the being was female. My name is Dr. Julia Cho. I'm a studier of sea anatomy. Her upper limb hinged around and pointed one of her stubs at the human on her right. This is Dr. Stuart Irwin, our designer of structural technology. She swung the stub to point at the other human on her left. And this is untranslatable. Arthur Mackenzie from our untranslatable detail. Swim leader Tafa swam closer to the things, taking the lead as was her place. We do not know these words, she told them. Untranslatable and untranslatable. Can you explain? The humans turned their heads. Greffon realized they were looking at each other. Dr. Julia Cho answered, yes, I think untranslatable is a place of leadership used by the defenders of territory. Untranslatable. Detail is a group that protects us from aggression. Aggression? Swim leader Tafa stayed motionless, thinking. Then she bobbed her tentacles in comprehension. Ah, you mean predators. Untranslatable. Arthur Mackenzie is your predator defense sacrifice. The humans looked at each other again. Then one called Arthur Mackenzie bobbed his head. More or less, it's my job to keep these two safe. I still don't think that's necessary, Dr. Julia Cho argued. The human made an odd motion, raising the top of his midsection closer to his head. I don't disagree with you, Doc, but it's not my call to make. This is technically a Defenders of Territory operation. I'm still just a untranslatable. Dr. Julia Cho continued to stare at the predator defense sacrifice. Arthur Mackenzie raised his appendages and showed his stubs to the other human. Hey, the swim leader wanted to send the whole detail. You should be thankful you talked him down just to me. The third spoke. Do you two really want to have this conversation right now? He waved his stubs at the school of Gleason surrounding them. In front of our new friends. Why would you not have a conversation in front of us? Asked swim lead Tafa. Are there secrets you wish to hide? No, said the third human. It's just rude to argue in front of new people. We're trying to put our best lower appendage forward here. Ah, said Tafa. We also try to avoid conflict among ourselves in front of other species. A school must appear unified if it does not wish to be prey. My sentiments exactly, said Arthur Mackenzie. There was a mild sting in his tone. There was a moment of silence. Greffon suspected the humans were communicating non-verbally. Dr. Julia Cho continued. Anyway, I heard you liked our music. Would you like to see me play something? Music. Greffon twitched with excitement. He had indeed heard the sounds the humans make. During first contact, the humans had gifted the Gleasons with something they called the complete works of Mozart. It had been playing on every sky swimmer in the Starsea. Oh, currents. Yes, please. Swim leader Tafa spoke for them all. All right then. Dr. Julia Cho pulled out a device that had been strapped to her midsection. Like all human things, it was oddly shaped, a large, curvy thing connected to a long, flat, rigid stalk. Taut lines of thin wire were stretched from top to bottom of it. I still can't believe you brought a guitar underwater, Dr. Stuart Irwin grumbled. You know it's going to be ruined after this. It's for a good cause, Dr. Julia Cho told him. She settled the guitar in her upper limbs and stopped swishing her fake fins. As she allowed herself to sink, her stubs placed themselves on the thin wires. A stub plucked one of them. A short, high-pitched noise came out of the guitar. These aren't designed for underwater, said the human. The strings don't resonate the same. Her stubs moved again, plucking more strings. A pleasing rhythmic set of tones came out of the guitar. But it should be enough to demonstrate how we make our songs. The humans sang. The Gleasons followed. The song she played was not the soaring majesty Greffon had experienced from the complete works of Mozart, but it was light and pleasing. It was also fascinating to watch. The human stubs moved with remarkable speed and precision, delicately plucking tiny string after tiny string. Greffon wondered if perhaps the creatures were not as disadvantaged as he thought. The next few minutes were bliss. Greffon had heard the singing of his own people, the music of other cephalopods, and recordings of the large swimmers of several worlds. He'd never imagined a creature using machines to make a voice, nor had he seen such dexterity in a limb that was not a tentacle. By the time Dr. Julia Cho finished playing, the entire school of Gleason were dancing wildly. Greffon had been repeatedly smacked by shaking frills and flailing tentacles, and he was pretty sure he'd accidentally struck several people himself. A few of his friends, HFY included, had actually collided while they were jetting back and forth with glee. I think you're a hit, Doc, Predator Defense Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie remarked. She looked at him with an expression Greffon assumed to be happy. Her head snapped back in startlement as all the Gleason began talking at once. That was amazing! Tools for songs. Do the clarinet concerto! The Gleasons crowded around the human and her marvelous music tool. Predator Defense Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie wrapped his stubs around an object strapped to the side of his abdomen, but released it after a few moments. It took swim leader Tafa several minutes to calm everyone down enough to hold a conversation. That was most impressive, said Tafa. I had no idea your stubs were so nimble. Stubs? Dr. Julia Cho sounded confused. She looked down at her appendages. Oh, they're called fingers. They're the adaptation that made us the dominant species on our world. Really? Tafa was doubtful. I don't mean to disparage, but they hardly seem that useful. They are, though. Dr. Stuart Irwin chimed in. Fingers are what led us to manipulate tools, and use those tools to forge better tools. Without them, we never would have reached the stars. Oh. Tafa did her best to sound impressed. That's good. You must be very proud of them. The human rubbed his stubs against the back of his head. Sure, yes, we're very proud. Would you like to try the guitar? Dr. Julia Cho changed the subject. Tafa made a high-pitched trilling squee. Her frills vibrated rapidly. Dr. Julia Cho held the music tool out. The swim leader wrapped herself around it. Her tentacles felt along the device until she found the strings. She stroked them, but could not quite pluck them as the human had. She tried again and again. Finally, she set the guitar on the floor of the ship. 3 of her tentacles held it down. Slowly, carefully, she slid the tip of her tentacle under one of the strings. She pulled. One of her suckers caught on the string. Tafa pulled again, trying to extricate her tentacle. Greffon saw what was about to happen. Swim leader, no! His warning was too late. A frustrated Tafa pulled as hard as she could. The string broke. Greffon stared in shock. The swim leader had broken the music tool. He trilled in alarm. The rest of the Gleasons trilled with him. It's all right! It's all right! Dr. Julia Cho held out her finger stubs. The guitar is broken, Hyfla wailed. Chitlo and several others trilled in agreement. It's all right, the human repeated. I am so sorry. Tafa stared forlornly at the broken instrument. I didn't mean to. It's okay, really, the human insisted. Strings break all the time. They do? All the time, Dr. Julia Cho said again. Usually we just replace them, but I didn't bring a spare string this time. The human made the same odd motion the other one had made earlier, raising the top of her midsection closer to her head. The truth is, the guitar won't last long underwater anyway. I brought it here expecting it to break. What? Taifa stared at the human. Why would you do such a thing? It's a cultural exchange, Dr. Julia Cho explained. I wanted you to see it. But it will break the music tool. Taifa was flabbergasted. It's just a tool, said the human. They're easy to make. Not that easy. Dr. Stuart Irwin muttered. Dr. Julia Cho turned to the other human. You do know everything you say gets transmitted, right? I know that now. Dr. Stuart Irwin moved his head from side to side. Sorry, Cho, I just hate to see a good guitar go down like that. It's for a good cause, Dr. Julia Cho reminded him. She turned back to Taifa. The best cause. We want to learn about you, and we want you to learn about us. I think this experience will be worth the loss of one guitar. You are very strange, Taifa told her. We have more things to show you, said Dr. Julia Cho. Hold that thought, Doc. Predator Defense Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie interrupted. Starbrand, this is Mackenzie. There was a pause, a long one. The human must be listening to someone on his ship. I'll ask the swim leader, stand by. Predator Defense Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie turned his head towards Taifa. Swim leader Taifa, we've got 3 ships that just came out of hyperspace. They're heading our way. Do you know anything about that? 3 ships? Taifa's tentacles twitched in alarm. So did Griffin's. What kind of ships? Sky swimmers, the sacrifice told her. Like yours. Sky swimmers? Taifa relaxed. That's good. This is usually a safe territory, but one can't be too careful. I agree, said the human. Can you talk to them with your implant? They aren't answering our hails. Certainly. Taifa activated a general broadcast. Greetings, friends. What brings you here today? There was no answer. Griffon flipped from channel to channel on his implant. He could hear the rest of his school whispering amongst themselves or calling out to the new ships. From the other sky swimmers, he heard nothing. His frills flattened against his head. There is no answer. Taifa twitched again. We must get to the Farseer. The school jetted for the Farseers. The humans followed much more slowly. Greffam peered into one of the lenses. 3 sky swimmers came into view. They were moving fast, faster than they should. Swim leader! It was Cheatlow. His voice quavered. Look, there's Sealock! Greffon looked more closely at one of the sky swimmers. A ring had been cut around the edges of its sealock and the damage repaired with a different material. Greffon trilled in alarm. Breeders! The rest of the school took up the cry. Breeders! Frills flattened, tentacles jerked in panic. The humans finally reached the Farseer station. What is it? Asked Predator Defense Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie. What's happening? You must leave. Swim leader Taifa urged the human. You must leave now. Why? The human pressed. Who are they? Breeders. Taifa drooped. The Cravels. Who are the Cravels? Predators, Taifa explained. The ocean is a place of predation. The Star Sea more so. The Cravels do not let their spawn compete in the sea of a world, and they breed very quickly, too quickly to sustain their own population. They send their children through the Star Sea to take the ships and worlds of people like us. So they're hostile. Very. Understood. Predator Defense Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie spoke to his ship. Starbrand, this is Mackenzie. Incoming ships are hostile. I say again, incoming ships are hostile. He listened for several seconds, then nodded. Understood. Mackenzie out. You must hurry, urged Taifa. You must get back to your ship. The Starbrand's disconnecting from your sealock, the human told her. They're going to engage the enemy. They're what? Taifa's frills flared and shook. No, you must leave. You can't fight the Cravels. Why not? Asked the human. Look at yourselves, Taifa shouted at the creature. You are slow. You have no beaks or pincers or stings. The Cravels will tear you to pieces. You might be dominant on dry land, but in the sea you are harmless. Her tentacles lashed in frustration. It's too late for my school, but we can still buy time for you. You can escape. No, we can't, said the sacrifice. We're not leaving you to die. If these Cravels want to fight, we'll give 'em one. Tell me, what kind of weapons do they have? Terrible weapons, wailed the swim leader. Crushing pincers and horrible sharp teeth. No, not. The human made a strange noise. I mean their ships, he explained. What kind of weapons do they have on their ships? Their ships? Taifa quivered. Their ships are sky swimmers. They'll have tendril lines with powerful magnets. They'll pull our ships together and force their way in through the sea lock. Lines with magnets on them? Predator Defense Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie bobbed his head. Okay, what else? Taifa looked at him with confusion. What do you mean, what else? They don't have any other weapons? Asked the human. Point defense. Untranslatable. Projectiles or energy weapons. I don't know what those are, said the swim leader. Huh. The Predator Defense Sacrifice relayed that information to his ship. He listened to the reply. Okay, the Starbrand's disconnected and getting clear. We need to get this sky swimmer moving. We can't, said swim leader Taifa. Can't? The human's eyes widened, then shrank. Why not? We retracted and disassembled the kinetic thrusters, the swim leader explained. By the time we reassemble them, the Cravels will be upon us. You disassembled? For the first time, the human seemed shocked. Why? It's a cultural exchange, Taifa snapped. We were going to show your designer of structural technology. Excrement, the human cursed. I am sorry, human. Swim leader Taifa stroked a comforting tentacle across the midsection of the Predator Defense Sacrifice. I am sorry you will die with us. Starbrand, this is Mackenzie, the human said to his ship. The Gleasons can't move their sky swimmer. The engines are disassembled. A pause. Cultural exchange, she said. Another pause. Longer. Understood. Mackenzie out. Griffin watched the human ship pull away. The Starbrand was almost as odd as the creatures it carried. It was small, barely 200 feet long and only 40 wide. It looked like a rectangular tube, with blocky attachments protruding from its shell at regular intervals. It moved by expelling matter from its thrusters. It was neither as swift nor as graceful as a sky swimmer. The predators were much closer now. Two of them changed course, moving to intercept the human ship before the helpless sex could escape. The third started slowing down. It would be nearly motionless by the time it connected to Griffin's sky swimmer, which it would do in the next 20 seconds. A flash of light drew Griffin's attention. Two objects ejected from the Starbrand. They were small and moving very fast. Violet flames trailed behind as the objects streaked towards the predator ships. They reached their targets in just under a second. When they struck, the sky swimmers tore open. Water and Cravels blasted out from 30-foot holes where the hull of the ships used to be. Current, take me, Taifa trilled. What was that? They're called torpedoes, Predator Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie explained. Chemically propelled projectiles carrying an explosive charge. Hold on a sec. He held up one of his finger stubs. This is Mackenzie? He listened. Understood. He shook his head. Bad news. What is it? It was Cheetlo who asked. Taifa was still dumbfounded, staring at the enemy sky swimmers the two humans had hit were completely decompressed now. Water and dying Cravels floated helplessly in the great empty. There would be no survivors. The Starbrand can't risk shooting the last sky swimmer, Predator Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie told him. As he spoke, metal tentacles extended from the Cravel ship. The sky swimmer shuddered as the magnetized tendrils latched on. There's too much chance they'd kill this ship too. Tell them to shoot anyway, said Taifa. We are already dead. The human shook his head again. Not my call to make, swim leader. I'm just untranslatable. My orders are to help you repel boarders until the Starbrand reconnects and sends reinforcements. You're too slow, swim leader Taifa told him. You cannot help. 4 of her tentacles singled out Cheatlo, Hyfla, Greffin, and another Gleason named Manglo. "You 4, stay with the humans. Everyone else, to the sea lock!" The other Gleasons jetted away. Predator Defense Sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie started to swim after them. Cheatlo swam in front of his face to stop him. "Stop, human. There's nothing you can do." "I'm a Predator Defense Sacrifice," said the creature. "You have no idea what I can do." He peered at the departing Gleasons. Most of them had already reached the sea lock. "But your swim leader was right. I might be too slow to do any good. Can you get me there?" "Get you there?" Cheatlo flared his frills. "Are you insane? The swim leader said to stay here." "Get you there how?" asked Greffin. "I'll grab onto one of you," the human said. "Maybe 2 of you. You can use that water jet thing you do, and pull me to the sea lock." "Absolutely not," said Cheatlo. "The swim leader doesn't want—" "We'll do it," said Greffon. "Greffon," Cheatlo protested. "He's a Predator Defense Sacrifice," Greffin reminded him. "This is what he's for." "The swim leader said we're all dead anyway," Hyfla added. "It won't hurt to try." She swam closer. "What do we do now?" "Just don't bite me," said the human. "I'm going to grab you now." His stubby fingers reached out, curling around Greffin's tentacle. The creature's grasp sent shivers of alarm up Greffin's body. He thought the little stalk stubs were delicate, but they squeezed with the force of a pincer. Greffon suspected the human was not using his full strength either. Greffon's instinct was to coil his tentacles around the attacking creature and bite with his poisoned beak. He resisted the urge, reminding himself that the deformed creature meant him no harm. The sacrifice's other stubs wrapped around Hyfla. She twitched, but stopped herself from biting the alien. "All right, I've got a good grip. Let's go to the sea lock." Greffon looked at Hyfla. She flicked her frills. Greffon flicked his in return, then pulled water into his mantle. He jetted, but his timing wasn't in sync with Hyfla's. They jerked forward at different times, yanking the human behind them. The crushing fingers tightened painfully, sending a pulse of anxiety up Greffon's limbs. He forced himself to ignore the pain. Greffon and Hyfla tried again. By the 3rd attempt, they were in sync, jetting for the sea lock with the human hanging on. Progress was much slower than Greffon expected. The human was heavy, very heavy. He must have weighed over 150 pounds. The Predator Defense Sacrifice did his best to improve their progress, swishing the false fins on the bottom of his limbs as fast as he could. But it still took almost 20 seconds to reach the sea lock on the other side of the ship. Metal had been melted in a circle in the center of the sea lock. There was no heat or stench of corrosive. The Cravels must have used a vibrational destabilizer. The circle was 6 feet in diameter, and it was surrounded by Gleasons trying desperately to keep the sea lock closed. They straddled the damaged material, half of their tentacles attached to the undamaged hull. The other half did their best to keep the disc that had been cut out of the sea lock in place. It was a strategy the Gleasons always used against predators. It almost never worked, but almost never was better than never at all. The other Gleasons noticed their arrival, but they were too busy to say anything. Even swim leader Tafa didn't bother to comment. Gleason's suckers were strong, but they were already flailing against the strength of the Cravels. The left side of the metal disc that used to be the sea lock pressed in as several Gleasons lost their grip. The human let go of Greffon and Hyfla. He swam to the breach, locking one set of fingers around the disc. His other fingers clamped onto the hull it had been cut from. The human pushed the disc back in place with a grunt of effort. It was a terrifying display of strength. "By the current," Hyfla trilled. The Cravels changed tactics. Instead of pushing the disc, they pulled. The human held his side of the disc, but the Gleasons couldn't. A red pincer reached through the new gap, crushing one Gleason and swiping 2 more off the sea lock. The disc fell inward. The first of the Cravels swam into the ship. The Cravel was an awful mix of crustacean and fish, 5 feet long, covered in red chitin, with 2 great pincers and maw full of sharp, jagged teeth. Yellow tendrils hung just below its mouth. They were shorter than Greffin's tentacles, but he knew they were stronger as well. The predator used them to guide prey into its maw and manipulate the technology of other species. The Gleasons had no hope against such a creature. Its armored form was nearly impossible to pierce, and it was immune to venom. Griffin's schoolmates panicked and jetted away. The Cravel's 6 eyes darted from target to target before settling on the nearest prey, the human. The predator shot forward, pincers ready to grab and crush. Predator defense sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie pulled a small object from the holster strapped to his midsection. He pointed the object at the Cravel and squeezed with his crushing fingers. A strange sound came from the object, loud like an explosion. A line of ripples and air appeared between the object and the Cravel. A hole appeared under one of the Cravel's eyes. The predator continued forward, but it was already dead. "Cultural exchange, procreators!" yelled the human. "Behold the power of my trigger finger." More Cravels burst out of the sea lock. The predator defense sacrifice killed them one after the other with ruthless efficiency. The Gleasons watched, stunned. It was HFY who finally spoke. "They really are proud of their fingers, aren't they?" "I don't blame them." Griffin watched the human in awe. His fear of the Cravel fell away, replaced by fear of the human and his terrible trigger finger. A predator so lethal it turned even Cravels into helpless prey. Then, that fear was replaced by something else. Hope. The human was unstoppable, and he was on Griffin's side. Griffin was going to live. "This is called a gun," Predator defense sacrifice Arthur Mackenzie casually explained as he murdered predators. "It uses a small explosion to launch a projectile at the enemy. They're usually not much good underwater, but I've got super cavitating bullets that—" He turned his sphere to look at the Gleasons and trailed off. "You know what? Doesn't matter." He ejected an object from the bottom of the gun and replaced it with a similar one. "Starbrand, this is Mackenzie, go ahead." He killed 2 more Cravels. "Understood." He turned to Tafa. "The Starbrand's reconnected. We've got 30 Predator defense sacrifices waiting at the other sea lock. Can you send someone to let them in?" "HFY, Griffin, go!" ordered the swim leader. Her frills were vibrating with hope and relief. As Griffin and his friends jetted toward the sea lock, Griffin couldn't help but ask, "Do you still think their little stock stubs are pitiable?" "Shut up," said the most beautiful being in the Starsea. She playfully stroked his frill. "I never said that."